Alexandria, Virginia was on lockdown during the Civil War. It was the first Confederate city to be captured and occupied by Union forces. But these Union forces weren't always the most kindest or most effective. The worst of them? Captain Rufus D. Pettit, superintendent of prisons, also known as the Commandant of Alexandria. Appointed to take care of and manage the thousands of prisoners in Alexandria, he soon turned into a warden of the cruelest nature. So much so that he was court-martialed for his crimes. Hi, I'm Madeline Firestein, trained historian and criminologist. I study crime, prisons, in America during wartime. As an Alexandrian myself, I spent the last 5 years diving into the history of my town and its occupation. I've produced dozens of articles, tours, lectures, and an upcoming book on the subject. It's been a mission of mine to bring more awareness to Alexandria's occupation and characters like Captain Pettit. Founded in 1749, it quickly grew to be a massive commercial and political hub 50 years before the nation's capital was formally built. It has connections to George Washington, slavery, and Robert E. Lee. When the Civil War broke out, Alexandrians overwhelmingly voted for secession, and 2/3 of the population fled the city prior to the Union forces marching into town. The remaining citizens soon became inundated with thousands of Union soldiers, and essentially, Alexandria became a military base. Alexandria was captured to protect Washington, D.C. on its Virginia border, protect it from Confederate invasion. So you get 25 forts built around the city, there are over 30 hospitals, and 5 prisons. Alexandria became a destination, a first stop for many injured and imprisoned soldiers coming off of the Virginia battlefields and further south. Many of the Confederate prisoners would stop in Alexandria first before heading up further north to prison camps like Elmira or Camp Chase or Point Lookout. Today, Alexandria is a quaint tourist town full of colonial charm and restaurants and cute shops. But let's go back in time to see how the situation during the Civil War, the situation with the prisons, went so wrong. Make sure to sign up for my newsletter, linked below, so you can get any updates on my book coming out on Alexandria and my research on the 5 prisons. I also include sneak peeks into content you won't find on any other platform. Check it out in the description. The prison situation grew unmanageably. You got Confederate POWs flooding into the city. They become a spectacle. Alexandrians line the streets to watch them be paraded down the main street before they arrive at their final destinations. And also, with thousands and thousands of Union soldiers occupying the town, the crime rate just jets up. And so you have hundreds and hundreds of Union prisoners being held in Alexandria for disorderly conduct, potential desertion, drunkenness, thievery, robbery, and also plain murder. Because Alexandria began to admit more prisoners than it intended, more buildings needed to be confiscated. The military government first used the city's jail, right? You would use the jail to be a jail. But soon they needed to add 4 more private buildings to use as prisons. So the first jail was, of course, the city jail, St. Asaph's. It had a capacity of about 300 inmates. Then we get Oddfellows Hall, which became a meeting place for local militia, as well as fraternal organizations. It also held around 300 to 400 prisoners. Prince Street Prison was owned by the Green family. It was a furniture factory. It was made famous on the PBS hit show Mercy Street. It was a bit larger and held about 500 prisoners. Informally known as the Slave Pen, the Franklin and Armfield office was a auction house for enslaved persons, part of Alexandria's very dark history. It was confiscated and held also around 300 to 400 prisoners. And lastly, and the focus of our discussion, the Washington Street Prison, formerly known as the Mount Vernon Cotton Factory, with no relation to George Washington. This was physically the largest, and it held the most prisoners, an average capacity of 1,500 souls in this building. The military government needed someone strong to take over the situation, because not only were the prisons getting more crowded, the conditions were worsening. In July of 1864, Rufus D. Pettit was appointed to be the superintendent of U.S. military prisons in Alexandria. He was born on July 4th, 1825, in Bridgewater, New York. Both of his parents died before he reached the age of 3, but he was still raised nearby by close family. Like many Civil War officers, Pettit had previously served in the Mexican-American War. When the Civil War broke out, he enlisted in the New York 1st Light Artillery, Company B. He gained acclaim for how he commanded his troops, especially during pretty egregious battles like Seven Pines, Antietam, and Chancellorsville. It was at the Battle of Chancellorsville in May 1863 that he suffered some sort of trauma. Now, his records don't go into depth about what exactly happened, but it did not list any physical injury. So we can deduce that something happened mentally, emotionally, or even psychiatric. And Pettit was medically discharged from the military and sent home. He returned home to his farm in New York, and he was feeling a bit fidgety. So he re-enlisted in the military as part of the Veteran Reserve Corps. The VRC was intended for any soldiers who were not fit for active duty, but still wanted to serve their country in some capacity. So he was actually part of the 12th VRC when he was appointed to be the superintendent of prisons. At the Alexandria Library's special collections, in his own handwriting, we have tri-monthly reports by Pettit that detail the conditions, population, and current safety situations of each of the 5 prisons. We can gather from these reports not only how many people were housed there, how much money was spent, but about any escapes, deaths, how many people were sick, how many riots happened. Superintendent Pettit barely helped these issues. We can say, well, he was just doing his job. He was reporting the conditions, but he had no control over, really, if these got remedied. He could ask for potatoes and tomatoes for scurvy. He could ask for heating because it's winter and cold, but it's not up to him, right? It's up to the military governor. It's up to the city to provide this. But the thing is, if that's his job to advocate for conditions and advocate to better them and advocate for these prisoners, I don't think he did a very good job. Because across the board, across all of these prisons, no one had heating. People were contracting scurvy, rampant disease. At one time, at the Washington Street prison, 18 prisoners escaped in one night. And there was a detail listed that a soldier was shot because he went too close to the windows to look out. So you tell me, did he really do his job? And let's go into some other details here. Pettit actually made everything worse. Let's go back to that Battle of Chancellorsville, to a guy who's mentally or physically unfit for duty, and now he's put in charge of some of the lowest level people in the Civil War, prisoners. Everyone looked down on prisoners, especially if you had deserted. Desertion was extremely taboo in the Civil War. Even though over 200,000 Union and 100,000 Confederates deserted, it was considered one of the most disloyal, unappreciated, cowardly things you could do in a time of national conflict. So people actually were trying to point out deserters. If it was found you were deserting, it could carry the death penalty. So you have someone in charge who is potentially not mentally sound or psychologically fit to be handling this population of soldiers. And it is confirmed that Pettit took out his anger and aggression on these soldiers. He ran what we call a reign of terror, trying to root out these deserters. He was convinced that anyone who was not on current assignment or who could not name their regiment or who gave a fake name was likely a deserter. And to be honest, there is some truth to that. Those who gave a fake name, those who provided sketchy details about where their regiment was or their history so far, probably were deserting. But here's the thing. He started to believe that any soldier could be a deserter. If something about your story just didn't add up, if you had been injured and convalescing in a hospital for 3 months and he's asking, why aren't you reassigned? Or if you're just wandering the streets of Alexandria without assignment, or something happens where now you're on the radar of this guy. He is not trusting you. Something's up with you. You don't seem right. Or maybe you look like you have information, but you don't. You are now subject to his reign of terror. Washington Street Prison, the largest one, became the headquarters for this reign of terror, for these interrogations, for this torture he will induce onto his prisoners, the people who he's supposed to be caring for, the people he's supposed to be making sure are safe and healthy. His reign of terror lasted until the Civil War essentially ended in April of 1865. Alexandria began to pack up its occupation. Hospitals were closing down, a lot of soldiers were being discharged to go home, the military offices were also consolidating, and the prisons were starting to shut down too. And those prisoners will be transferred to other locations outside of a metropolitan city. The last prison report with actual prisoners went out in May of 1865. Afterwards, some of those prisons, like Washington Street, became barracks for other soldiers, but not prisoners. Some of you may be asking, how did Pettit get away with this? Why don't I know about him? Why don't we read about him more? Who is this guy? And you may also be asking, isn't anyone checking in on these prisoners? Are people just taking Pettit's word for it? Are there any other staff there? Well, yes, but it's really just Pettit and then the wardens he hires, he appoints for each prison. So honestly, it's kind of an inside job. I mean, maybe these wardens are in cahoots with Pettit. Maybe they also believe, like he does, that these guys are scoundrels, that they're deserters in disguise. It's an extremely harsh reality, but one that we as historians and scholars just have to reckon with. That no one came to help these guys. No one came to help. So when the war was over, some of those prisoners who had been discharged and sent home actually came back to report, hey, this happened to me. I was tortured. You need to know about this. So several of these prisoners charged him with essentially neglect, abuse, and torture. The Alexandria Gazette, a very famous and historic newspaper in the city, published on October 31st, 1865, Pettit's charges. But within the next week or two, the vibe shifted. The problem was, in order to have a true trial, you need witnesses. And a lot of the witnesses who worked at the prisons or who were formerly prisoners as well, they were at home. They were discharged. They left. So it was kind of like a wrangle to try and get people to come back to Alexandria to testify either on Pettit's behalf or to side with the prisoners accusing him. So this did delay the process. One supportive testimony in particular was quite enlightening, and it came from Captain H.H. Foster, who is the warden of Washington Street Prison. In this testimony, Captain Foster called these prisoners scoundrels, that they were bounty hunters, that they're rascals, that they have no business lying about what they endured. And he defended Pettit, saying he had to do what he had to do because of the characters of these guys, because of their history, because of who they were. Now, this was like a 3-page long thing. This was pretty intense. But at the end of the day, the prisoners won. And in January of 1866, Pettit was dishonorably discharged from the military for his crimes, meaning he could not re-enlist ever again in the military. And his pension was kept from him. He was not entitled to a military pension. Rufus Dudley Pettit died in New York on August 24th, 1891, at the age of 66. His legacy as a Civil War cruel warden, as this torturer, was almost entirely lost. Besides the article from HistoryNet, which I'm going to link down below, there isn't anything written about this guy. So I have worked tirelessly to bring more attention to Alexandria's Civil War prisons, Rufus Pettit, and the prisoners he tortured. What do you make of this situation? Leave a comment below. To learn more about Civil War Alexandria, check out my website where I have links to past lectures and articles I've done. Please subscribe to the channel to learn more about Alexandria, and check out my upcoming book with Arcadia Publishing. Thanks for watching.